All right, strap in, everyone. We're diving deep today into the Quran. Surah 54, Al-Qamar.
Okay.
And just a quick refresher, the Quran, that's the central text of Islam, right?
Yeah.
Muslims believe it's literally the word of God.
Right.
And we're going to be tackling some pretty heavy stuff. Warnings, punishments, and, really understanding God's message, all that.
Mm-hmm.
There's this one phrase that just keeps popping up. You'll notice it. So how are my punishment and my warnings? Like a drumbeat almost.
Yeah, it's a powerful image.
It really drives home the point.
Yeah.
Reject the message, there can be consequences. We'll be unpacking some pretty intense stories, some wild imagery. Get ready, it's going to be a fascinating ride.
I think what's always struck me about this surah is how it blends these historical narratives with these, timeless lessons about, being human and how we relate to, the divine.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. First verse, bam, right off the bat. Pretty dramatic event, right? The splitting of the moon. The hour has drawn near and the moon has split. Talk about a way to grab your attention.
It certainly sets the stage. I mean, this is presented as a miracle, a sign, something undeniable. But then you immediately see how people react. Disbelief, dismissal. They call it continuous magic, they'd rather just stick to what they already believe than actually grapple with what they're seeing.
It's like they're refusing to, see what's right there in front of them.
Exactly.
And that, that whole thing about rejecting signs, that's not just ancient history.
Yeah.
We see that all the time, don't we? People clinging to their opinions, even when, the evidence is staring them in the face. Makes you wonder about human psychology, right?
Yeah.
Why do we resist the truth, even when it's right there?
That's a question worth asking. It seems like maybe this need for certainty, control, accepting something that rocks your world, that can be scary, even threatening. But as this surah shows us, clinging to what's false, that has consequences, big ones.
And this surah doesn't shy away from showing us those consequences.
Yes, absolutely not.
Story after story, all making the same point, starting with, Noah.
Verse 9, it just sets the scene. Before them, the people of Noah disbelieved. They rejected our servant and said, crazy, and he was rebuked. Just immediate rejection, refusal to listen.
Noah's plea to God. Man, it's heartbreaking. My Lord, leave not upon the earth a single disbeliever. You feel that desperation, his worry for his people, and then, boom, punishment, swift, devastating. Floodgates of heaven with water pouring down, the earth bursting with springs, cataclysmic.
The imagery is so powerful, this force of nature unleashed, divine retribution. But amidst all that chaos, Noah and those who listen to him, they're saved, carried in a craft of planks and nails. Even when it seems like everything's destroyed, there's still hope. For those who believe, for those who follow the guidance.
But then, kind of takes a step back and asks, and we left it as a sign. Is there anyone who would take heed? It's like a challenge to us, isn't it? Are we paying attention, learning from this, or are we just going to make the same mistakes?
Absolutely. And it brings us back to that question, the one that keeps coming up. So how are my punishment and my warnings? These stories, they aren't just ancient history, they're lessons for all time, ones we should probably listen to.
Yeah. And the surah, it keeps going. Even more examples, more warnings, more chances for us to, think about things, learn. The people of Anad, right, Thamud, two civilizations that faced the consequence.
They denied the truth. Simple as that. And they were met with a screaming wind on a day of unrelenting misery. Just imagine this relentless wind tearing through everything, divine wrath.
And it doesn't hold back on the details. Plucked away as though they were trunks of uprooted palm trees. Utterly powerless against it.
They also rejected the warnings. But their story, it's got this new element, a test.
A she-camel.
Right, sent to them, very specific instructions.
We are sending the she-camel as a test for them, so watch them and be patient. That's verse 27. Crystal clear, right? Share the water. Between them and the camel, test of obedience. Can they live in harmony with this creature sent by God?
It's interesting, isn't it? The camel becomes a symbol of something bigger. Are they willing to follow, even when it's, different, challenges how they do things?
But they fail. Big time. Disobey. Harm the camel.
Yeah.
Consequences. Swift and severe. We sent against them a single scream, it says, and they became like crushed hay. Sudden. Overwhelming.
An absolute power of God's judgment.
Yeah.
And of course, the question comes back. So how are my punishment and my warnings? It's pattern, warning, rejection, punishment. And we just keep repeating it.
But hold on, there's more. The surah is not done with us yet. Two more stories. kind of interwoven, highlighting, I guess you could say the specific sins, but also this like universality of God's justice.
Yeah, the people of Lot, and once again, Pharaoh. Their stories, they're linked together, really amplifies the message.
And that's where things get really interesting. Hold tight, we'll be right back to explore those stories. And what they tell us about, being human, and what happens when we make choices. Okay, so we're back and ready to unpack these intertwined stories, right? Lot's people, Pharaoh's people. I'm like really curious to see how they tie into everything we've been talking about. Warnings, consequences, all that.
Well, you see here, it's interesting how the Surah kind of highlights both things, right? The specific things each group did wrong, but also this bigger idea of God's justice. It's like zooming in and zooming out at the same time.
Yeah, okay, I see what you mean. So Lot's people first. Verse 37, it's pretty direct, no beating around the bush. They even lusted for his guests, so we obliterated their eyes. Strong image, right? Breaks the laws of hospitality, morality.
And then bam, right after, that phrase again. So taste my punishment and my warnings like a bridge, connecting the specific to the universal, saying, hey, this isn't just about them. Anyone who ignores God's boundaries, this applies to you too.
This is what happens.
Yeah.
And verse 38, it's like another layer of that swift punishment, no messing around. Right. Early morning brought upon them enduring punishment, just boom, done, final.
And then there it is again, that phrase. So taste my punishment and my warnings. It's almost like a recurring musical theme, tying these stories together, connecting them to this bigger message about, accountability, what we do matters.
And then seamlessly we move to Pharaoh, who, like you were saying before, he pops up all over the Quran, symbol of arrogance, defiance against God. And it's like his story here builds on everything we've already seen, right?
Exactly. It's like, oh, the warnings also came to the people of Pharaoh, verse 41. They had every chance to listen, to change, but they just rejected it all.
Verse 42, it just says it all. They rejected our signs, all of them, so we seized them, the seizure of an almighty omnipotent. Like, what are you to do? Resist God. Doesn't matter how powerful you think you are.
Yeah, you think you're in control. But there's a higher power, always. And then it speaks directly to the doubters, right? Like, are your unbelievers better than all those? It's making you think, making you compare.
Like, look what happened to them. Powerful civilizations gone because they didn't listen. Think you're any different. It's makes you think.
And verse 44, that arrogance. Or do they say, we are united and we will be victorious? We see this all the time, right? Human strength, unity, like that's going to overcome, God's will.
But the surah, it shuts that down real quick. The multitude will be defeated and they will turn their backs. Verse 45, nope. Reject the message. You're going to face defeat, humiliation.
And then it shifts big time from those specific stories to this big universal concept, Judgment Day. The language gets more, intense. Images are vivid. You really feel the weight of what's coming for those who rejected the truth.
Verse 46, more disastrous and most bitter. That's Judgment Day. Terrifying. And then those who did wrong, they're in confusion and madness. Verse 47, you can almost feel the panic, despair.
And punishment, man. It's described vividly. The day when they are dragged upon their faces into the fire. Taste the touch of Sakar. That's verse 48, Sakar. That's, a specific level of hell. Islamic tradition. Intense heat, suffering. It's meant to make you feel it. The fear, the consequences of doing wrong.
And then you've got the righteous, verse 54, total opposite. The righteous will be amidst gardens and rivers, paradise. Reward for those who listened, who lived right.
So we've gone from those specific historical stories to this grand, universal idea, judgment, the ultimate reckoning. What we choose, it matters, it has consequences.
Yeah, it's a lot to process, but the way the surah connects it all, the specific, the universal, the past, the eternal, it's pretty amazing.
And there's one more verse I think it's easy to miss with all this talk of judgment and eternity, but it says something really profound. About God's power, our place in all of this.
Oh yeah, I think I know which one you mean. It's simple, but it really gets to the core of what this surah is about.
Verse 50, and our command is but once, like the twinkling of an eye. We'll come back to that one in a minute. It's worth pondering.
Okay, so we're back, and you were about to say something about verse 50, the one that really stood out to you.
Yeah, verse 50, and our command is but once, like the twinkling of an eye. It's like, after all that intensity about judgment and everything, it's this quiet statement about God's power.
Yeah, it's simple, but powerful. What is it about that verse that, that caught your attention?
It's just so stark, so immediate. God's command, it's instant, absolute, no waiting, no second chances. It's just done. Like that. A blink of an eye.
Makes you think, all our plans, all that striving for control, and ultimately it's God's will, right, that determines things. It's like, whoa, we're part of something much, much bigger.
And that ties into the whole message of Surah Al-Qamar, I think. Recognizing our place, acknowledging that there's a power greater than us, and that our choices, they matter, they have consequences.
So we've gone through these stories: warning, rejection, punishment. We've seen what happens when people defy God's message. We've seen the rewards for those who do right. It's been quite a journey.
And it all comes down to that. Our command is but once, like the twinkling of an eye. It's like a wake-up call. Live with intention. Every moment counts.
We've really had a lot to think about with this deep dive into Surah Al-Qamar. As we wrap up, what are your final thoughts for our listeners? What can we take away from all of this, and how can we, actually apply it to our lives?
That's the big question, right? These stories, they come from a specific religious context, but I think the wisdom in them, it goes beyond that. They remind us to seek knowledge, to understand truth, to live by our values, and maybe most importantly, to look at ourselves, our actions, our choices. We're responsible for them.
It's not just about hearing the stories, it's about internalizing them and using them to live better, more meaningful.
Make each moment count.
Exactly. Recognize the power of belief, understand the consequences of what we do, and try to be, the best versions of ourselves.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into Surah Al-Qamar. Listeners, I hope you'll take some time to reflect on these stories. What speaks to you? What lessons can you apply? And how can you use this knowledge to find more understanding, more purpose in your life? Thanks for joining us on this journey, and until next time, keep searching, keep learning, and keep diving deep.